Hello everyone and welcome to this presentation. My name is Carl Bokvist. I'm an equity research analyst at ABG. But that is enough about me. Now I hand it over to this presentation of Kameo.
Thank you very much. My name is Sebastian Harung. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Kameo. Let's see here if I can make this. You have to turn things on in Sweden. Today I'm going to present Kameo. Kameo is a crowdfunding platform where you can invest directly in small companies and mostly smaller property companies. And the reason why we created Kameo is we want to open the doors so more people can invest in an interesting asset class. My background is investment banking at DNB, and I remember when we worked at DNB, we were not allowed to book our flights ourselves. We had to use a travel agency. And then a company called Norwegian came along, and all of a sudden more and more people were allowed to book their own flights. Think about that. And today, we all book the flights ourselves, and I think this is a little bit how we think about finance and saving. You shouldn't be using expensive capital or kapitalförvaltare or asset managers. You can do it yourself. And this is what we bring to the market. Kameo is a very easy digital platform where you can invest yourself. And a little bit about why we started Kameo. I think looking at the banks today, you find a lot of motivation. They have an important role in the society. They bring the cash from those who deposit them to different companies. But they grow, and they've grown so big. They are too big maybe to focus on what they should really do. And here are a few examples of what they've been doing lately. In a bank called Deutsche Bank, they just fired 1,500 employees. And while they did that, 2 directors ordered tailors to come into the office. People were leaving with their, the flowers in the box, and then tailors come up to make tailor-made suits for some of the directors. It's a little bit about, this feeling of being too big and too important to fail. And we want to change that a little bit. And then we have our friends in Denmark. It's been going quite well for Danske Bank lately. Another thing happened this summer. They had a product that they sold, which the customer, it was an asset management product, so it's a saving product. They sold it to 87,000 customers, and they could not make money on it. The base case was that the customers would lose. And now they had to fire the CEO of Danske Bank again, and they had to pay back 400 million to the private individuals who had bought this product. And a little bit more about this here on this slide. I hope you can see here on the right side, we have some figures on how much of the the GDP and the financial markets that the banks and the brokers actually control. And on the bottom slide here, you can see how much revenues the American brokers take out of as a percentage of GDP. It's been growing a lot. So even though we have, digital innovation, we are much more efficient now. The brokers take out way more than they've done before. And on the left side, we can see the assets that the banks control in terms of GDP. Here it's in the US, it's around 60%. And some countries it's even more. I think Iceland had the record with 600-700%. And I think this has been important for Kameo, why we set up this platform of making it easy for everybody to invest. And the name Kameo means to play a cameo role or a background role. So Quentin Tarantino is always a cameo in his movies. He leaves the stars are the main characters, and for us that's the small savers and the companies that borrow. We don't think the banks should be the main player. And this is the simple illustration of the concept. On the left side, you have the companies that borrow, smaller property developers, smaller property owners for Kameo. And on the right side, you have the private and professional investors. We have a Scandinavian platform, so we can do loans in all 3 countries. The crowd here is mostly private individuals, around 90%. It's today around 10,000 investors in this crowd. They can then directly invest in company loans, and the loans always have security. It's always backed by pledge. in 90% of the cases, that's a property pledge. In some cases, it's personlig borgen or private bail. But they can then completely free and very easy invest in a portfolio of loans. Of course, if you invest all your money in one loan, that's high risk. But if you invest in 50 loans, the most active investors that we have invested in 100 loans, some in Sweden, some in Denmark, some in Norway. Then you've created a very efficient portfolio of loans. And it's free of charge. There's no fees for the investors. And you can start with as little as 500 kroner. So people investing 10,000 can actually make an efficient portfolio. And every month they get interest payments so that you can reinvest. And hopefully the borrowers also pay back, but we will come to that later. Number one question I always get when I present this concept is, why do these property companies borrow from you? Shouldn't they go to the bank? And the answer is that most of them do. Most of them go to the bank, but banks use long time, and banks have strict regulations on how to lend. That means that smaller property developers, they don't get the attention that they want, and they could need more funding. We have many clients who have done maybe 2 projects a year with the bank, and then they want to do 3 and 4, and the bank say, hey, relax, 2 is enough, and then we can do number 3 and 4. Or they say the bank can do maybe 50% of the value, and we can take it up to 60 or 70%. So we are then prioritized behind the bank. They pay a lot more interest rates to our investors through our platform, but they'll do it because it's quicker. And in many cases, they just prefer to stay with us because they can get a loan in a week, and they have flexible terms. They can repay when they want. And in some cases, we can be more flexible on the security package than the banks do. And they also like the fact that they can, send in a loan application, get a loan, and they don't have to give ownership away. They want to have the upside themselves. And the borrowers, they typically borrow for construction loans. It could either be property for private or bosteder, or it can be commercial properties where they renovate or improve so they can get higher hyresintäkter or rental income. We also do quite a lot of purchase loans, so we give a loan and then the bank later come, which is, I think, in Sweden called brygglån. And this slide is meant to explain a little bit about the loans that we actually target. So it's not that we only do loans that are, high risk and should never get a loan. In the inner circle, you have. So this figure is kind of the economy and the number of loans that you have out there. In the inner circle, you have the biggest ones, the most creditworthy ones. That's facilitated by the banks. And the gray donut around those loans who are just not for anybody. I mean, that could be newly established companies. It can be companies with a lot of payment remarks, close to default. So our job is to say no to those. Of course, they apply a lot. And we say no to maybe 80, 90% of the applications that we get online. And then in the beautiful purple middle donut, that's the creditworthy but not bankable. I mean, I've been working at the big bank myself, and I know we love to give loans to Statoil or the other big Norwegian companies, because then you could sell credit cards, insurance, you can sell a lot more, you can do FX, currency. But smaller companies could be the same amount of work, but you don't get that income. And banks, when they do lending to smaller property developers, that's a risk weight 100% on their balance sheet. So they want to lend to you privately to your house, because then that's risk weight only 25%. They don't have to come up with that much equity. So they prefer to give you a private loan backed by your private house, but they don't want to give it to a smaller property developer. So that's where we come in. We can do loans to those companies that are too small, that the banks don't really care. And we can do it until the bank actually come there. I mean, if you want to do a smaller project, at one point it's going to be bankable. If you've constructed it, it's all complete, you've sold it, then you might get a bank loan. We can bridge until that. And these loans work quite well for crowdfunding concept, because investors, they want to invest in something that they understand. And I think most people understand the property markets. At least they have some feeling about it. We can have a pledge in the property, either first or second priority. And since it's a short loan, I mean, if it's a construction loan, that's typically 12 months for the projects that we do. then the borrowers, the companies, they don't mind to pay 10% interest rate plus because it's such a short time. In kroner and øre, that's not so much. So we target non-bankable but creditworthy. And here is an example of a typical loan that we do. It's a smaller property developer in Sweden, in Stockholm maybe. They have an option to buy a land in Nacka. They can develop 10 parhus or something like that, and they pay with equity to get that land. And then the bank says, perfect, sell 90% or 70% in advance, and you get the construction loan, a big kreditiv. Today, that's quite difficult in Stockholm because buyers don't want to buy in advance because they don't know if the price is going to go up and down in 12 to 24 months. So we come in and we can say, we can, brygga, or we can do this. We can take the first loan, 20% pre-sold, just 2 units, that's quite easy. And then when you've sold more, the bank can take over and refinance us. This is something that we see a lot of. Also, we do a lot of smaller råvindsprojekter where you have, maybe 2 or 3 apartments being built. It's too small for the banks. We can control the construction risk because we follow up quite closely, and we know we can always sell it. We never do more than 75% loan to value, so that we can adjust the prices down if something should go wrong and sell it. And property developers, they like to do projects. They have a high margin typically, so they rather pay high interest to get started than wait for the bank. And here are some examples of how, and this is how it looks on our website. You have a marketplace of different loans in different countries. Of course, there's currency risk, but if you have a long-term perspective, who can invest in Denmark these days? It's crazy expensive kroner. But if you think long-term, it might be worth it. The loans have been typically smaller, around 2 million in average, but lately it's been going up a lot. The normal size at the platform now is between 5 and 20 million for each loan. And investors can come in and put from 500 kroner and up in each loans on the platform. Yeah, shortly about us, we've been around since 2016. We've been growing quite slowly because we want to focus on the quality of the loan portfolio that we have and set the processes. We have a team of 25 in 3 countries. The largest team is in Stockholm. We have our own technical platform. It was built by our CTO, who has formerly founded Nordnet and Avanza. And we handle the entire process from the screening of the loan applications that we get, all the way to all the payments, to register pledges, to default handling. What happens if a loan goes into default situation? We handle that. I'm going to come back to that later. And we also do automatic tax reporting. So it's quite convenient. You can start with small amounts. It's completely free. And we will make sure you report your taxes. And so far we have raised into the Kameo, the company, around 55 million Norwegian kroners in equity. And this year, ABG Sundal became the 2nd largest owner in the company. So we work quite closely with ABG. That means that smaller loan applications that they get will come to us. And then we hand the larger ones to ABG. And ideally, smaller cases at our platform will grow, and when they do an IPO or something, then ABG takes over. Yeah, some of the statistics of what we've done so far. We've facilitated more than 370 million. 56% of that is already repaid to investors. So it's a short loan duration in average. We have 9.8 annual interest rate so far to the crowd. We don't take any of that, so that goes directly to the crowd. And so far, we've had 6 loans that have been non-performing or in a default situation of the 170. And those 6 loans, 4 of them have now been repaid in full. And we have 2 more outstanding. We have pledge and I expect them to be 100% also sold, but it's a default process. It can take time. So far, we haven't had any credit losses at all to the investors. And a little bit what happens when we have a credit loss situation or a default situation. We had a loan in Norway where he had taken a junior finance with us, and then he had trouble selling the apartments, and he missed the repayment date. And then we informed the crowd, and people got a little bit upset. And some guys called in and said, take it easy. He's a nice guy. He's doing a nice project. Give him time. And some others called in and said, kill them, the douchebag. He's wasting my money. And so we get kind of all the reactions. But what we do is we are the ombud or the agent on behalf of the investors in that loan. So we represent all lenders. We have registered the pledge, but you can't have many hundred pledge holders in Sweden. So we are the one that do that. It's a little bit like Nordic Trustee do in the bond market. And together with the borrower, we try to find the best solution. I mean, we also have the borrower is also our customer, so we don't want to fire sale directly. And typically that doesn't give the best outcome either. So this case in Norway, where we had a loan that was missed the due date, we said you need to sell them now, and you have to step up, and you have to lower the prices. So either you sell them now or we do, and it's going to be the best prices if you do. And then after a few months, he managed to sell, and we had processes like that in Sweden as well, where we push the borrower to sell, and we use our lawyer to do that process. And we always take out extra pledge in the property so we can cover our legal expenses in that process. So we can, the ambition is to give 100% back. In Norway, we have to use Lindorf because of regulation, and they will have to take a cut from the investors. But in Sweden, we can do it ourselves. And I think it's important that we do this because it builds some level of certainty and trust to the crowd that we actually take care of them when the shit hits the fan, so to speak. And we tried that now in 6 cases, and it looks to be working. Yeah, and I've been mentioning this a little bit through the presentation. We've had high returns. We hope to continue that, of course. But if you try to sign up, you will see it's quite simple. And it's also simple to create this portfolio. It's, of course, important that you do that you don't put all the money in one loan. So we hope that most of the investors create broad portfolios. I think you've seen all this before. This is just a little bit about the current sentiment here in Sweden. The blue line is here on the right axis. That's the development of property prices in Sweden. And then the green, which is on the left, that's the real estate index on the Stockholm Exchange. And in Norway, this looks a bit like this. I'm really envious you guys how well it's going on the property market here. But I think the point about this slide is Kameo is higher risk than investing directly in your own property, of course, but it's lower risk than being on the stock exchange. So we should be somewhere in between, and with an average return around 10%. That's where we are right now. And this one is always fun to show. You can mix this a little bit to show how we want it to be, but the straight line that goes straight to heaven, that's our return so far, accumulated, compared to, for example, the broad share index in Stockholm. I mean, we have a short history, and of course we're going to get some defaults going forward, but this is, so far it's going well. Okay. And I think going forward, just a short end note, I think that this concept is way bigger in other countries like Germany, the UK, and I think we will see similar development here in Sweden and the Nordics, that we will be in England, for example, or the UK. I think it's more than 20% of loans to smaller property developers and smaller companies go through platforms like this, and I think we will see some similar development in Scandinavia as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the first question, I mean, you've already addressed portions of it, but when it comes to the risk of a default, how do you assess that initially when you accept the customer onto your platform?
So we put quite a lot of time to say no to the companies that we shouldn't be working with, and I think that for us to be efficient, it's important that we do it very early. But we have a risk category system from A to E. So A is the best. None of the loans that have been in non-performing has been in the risk grade A or B. It's been C, D, and E loans. So we spend a lot of time on working with the persons behind the companies that need to have relevant experience, and we prefer good guys, bad project than bad guys and good projects. So you should have some experience. You need to have your own skin in the game, and so we work a little bit on that. And then I think it's important that the crowd they look at the risk grade and they look also at the security, because our experience is that some projects just sometimes you have a big low application, it takes longer time, something happens, but if you have pledge, you can always sell. So I think, and of course, good pledges, that's an A and B loan on our platform. So we focus on that.
So it's both a quantitative and a qualitative assessment of the potential loans on your platform.
Yes.
So it's not just a strict robotic system saying this applies, this doesn't. You actually assess the people behind.
Yeah, and we
idea.
Either we or someone in working with us check out the properties as well. But I think most of the companies that we reject, we can do that automatically with USE. If you have payment remarks, you just automatically reject it.
And then just going back to just some specifics here. What was the average duration of a loan? How long should you perhaps be prepared to commit money for a loan?
I think it's a minimum 12 months. We plan at one point to introduce a secondary market, so you can sell off your assets. But again, we don't know if there's going to be much liquidity. So I think that at least 12 months is something that you need to look at.
And just administratively, you say that you handle the tax reporting and things like that, but how does it work in practice? Do you have to open an account with you? Can you have an investment savings account or an ISK, as we call it in Sweden? Or what do we have to do in order to register at your website and provide money?
Well, it's quite simple. So I think it takes an average a few minutes. You sign up with Bank ID, you answer a little bit, where does the money come from? And things like that. It's KYC, it's normal in finance. And then you can place bids, and afterwards you deposit. We have a client account at DNB, so meaning that when you deposit the money and it's not invested in a company, the money is never at risk. You don't have an exposure towards us. You have an exposure towards DNB. So that's quite simple, and we will do the tax reporting. You have a dashboard, you can see the investments, your return. So that's about what you have to do, basically.
And then the average interest rate was about between 9 and 10%.
Yeah.
What has been the highest? What has been the lowest of your projects?
We have a few A loans that's 5%, and then the highest risk has been, I think, 14% E loan.
And now you focus a lot on properties. Of course, that means that you can have a security to back up the loan. But has there been an interest to expand into other areas as well, where you see a potential that you could do the same kind of service, provide loans that perhaps the banks won't?
Yes, we do most property loans because the appetite in the crowd seems to be biggest there. But we've tried a few other loans to see also how that works. The challenge is that we need to understand the market and the industry, and we don't know much about all the other industries, so we've been a little bit careful. What we've been trying to do is a few franchise loans, where a franchise taker, for example, within a hamburger chain, the banks can do a little bit of that loan, but they don't do much because they won't get a guarantee. But for example, McDonald's, they've never had the default situation in 12 years in Sweden. So we think that that's a nice company to lend to without much security. But as you said, you can't get that security package.
And then finally, how large share of your loans are currently in Sweden?
Around 60 to 70%.
Okay.
And Sweden is our main market and growing. That's where we're growing most.
Perfect. I think we are running out of time here. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.